Ladies and gentlemen, get on the edge of your seats because this is an Action Sports Jax special presentation. Storytellers of the 904.
Well, if you know the Jacksonville Jaguars, you probably know this name, although you might wonder, what did he do? Well, he did a little bit of everything, and he's one of the originals when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars back in the mid-'90s. But prior to that, our guest today on Storytellers of the 904 also was part of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Miami Dolphins, and that's how he got his start in the NFL, and then eventually made it all the way to Canton, Ohio, in the Hall of Fame. We talk all about it today with our guest, Dan Edwards, who was in charge of the communication department, basically is the easiest way to say it, with the Jacksonville Jaguars for so long, and now retired and looking good, by the way. Looked like you either just played golf, played tennis, had a good breakfast, sat on the porch and had some coffee. I don't know which one, but you're looking good.
Retirement takes years off your face, I can tell you that.
Are you enjoying it, by the way?
Yes.
From the everyday grind of the NFL to now what? You enjoying it?
Yes. Yeah. You kind of have to find your way a little bit and fill your day. But the nice thing is, my daughter Danielle asked me within a few months of my retiring, she said, what's retirement like? I said, it's Saturday every day. I said, that's kind of what it is. So no complaint.
Yeah, and you were in such a routine, by the way, for so many years, 40-plus years. That probably was a little bit different getting up on a Saturday or a Sunday or depending on what time you get up because it's an early day when you're a PR guy.
No question. No, but there was adjustment, and it was, I think, as I told some people at the time, I want to be good at retirement, so I'm going to try to put some effort into it. So it's been good. Yeah,
so far so good. Hall of Famer at retirement is a good thing to be able to be. All right, let's go way back. From the Maryland area?
Yeah,
and,
Washington, D.C. area, yeah.
And then eventually found your way to Oregon. How'd you do that?
Well, I went to high school and then junior college in suburban D.C. in Maryland. And my dad worked with the government at the time of the Department of Interior, and he took a job out in Portland. So my parents moved out there when I had just started junior college. And I was looking around at schools to transfer to, and I didn't want to transfer to any of the schools in Virginia or Maryland. Started looking into the schools in Oregon, and at the time, Oregon had a top 20 business program and a bad football team. And I thought, well, I'm going to apply there. And I was able to get in-state tuition right away since my dad was with the government. So that worked out great. So went out there and spent my last 2.5 years of college at Oregon in Eugene and loved it. And it wasn't anything like it is today. Today, it's a brand. It's a big deal. In those days, it was about the only thing it was known for was track.
Yeah. I was going to say that. It wasn't the cool thing. Now kids grow up at 8 years old, 10 years old, looking at those jerseys, and it's become a very cool thing, but it wasn't always like that.
That's right. And now you see it everywhere. I mean, NFL as well as college, multiple uniforms, multiple helmets, throwbacks. It's become fashion, it's become trend, and it's kind of part of teams' branding. And I think it's a really, really cool thing.
But you were getting into business.
Yeah, business major. So that's what I wanted to do. Absolutely.
Did you know what you wanted to do with a business major? That's pretty wide scoping, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think I was like most college students. I got to my senior year, and I knew I wanted to get a business degree because I figured that was a pretty versatile degree to have. I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to work in. And the idea came to me one day. I'm thinking, how can I mix my degree with something I really love doing? And like a lot of kids, you included, grow up playing sports. And I thought maybe I can work in sports. And this was way before sports administration was a thing. In fact, at the time, there were only 2 universities that offered a sports administration master's degree.
Wow.
And Ohio University was the first of those, and I applied and got in at Ohio. So that was kind of where the light went on. I wanted my business degree. I wanted to work in something I would enjoy, and sports for me was perfect. So that's kind of led me into that field.
Yeah, you became a Bobcat. Were you good at sports growing up, and how big a sports fan were you of your local teams?
Big fan. And again, growing up in the D.C. area, it was mostly, at that time, the Redskins and the Washington Senators, which a lot of people today don't even realize. The Texas Rangers used to be the Washington Senators, and now you've got the Nationals.
Yeah.
So, big fan of the local sports teams. And I actually, going back when I was younger, we lived in Madison, Wisconsin for a year. And it was right when the Packers won Super Bowls 1 and 2, which weren't even called Super Bowls yet. And that, we were an hour from Green Bay, so obviously the Packers were the team. So grew up younger. It was a Green Bay Packers fan. And here's a funny aside. When I retired, my brother and my two sisters, as a retirement gift, bought me a share of stock in the Packers. And as you know, they're the only team that offers stock, and it's non-voting. It's a souvenir. But I've got a framed share of non-voting stock for the Green Bay Packers in my office at home. And I told somebody I spent 38 years working in the NFL in communications and PR and broadcasting, and then I retired, and now I'm a part owner. So that's full circle.
That is, and it's a full circle, full ownership or part ownership as well. Hanging out here with Dan Edwards. So you almost went into baseball, though. I mean, you flirted with the idea of baseball.
I did. I worked one season right after I graduated from Oregon. There was a minor league, the Cincinnati Reds minor league team, single A team is in Eugene, Oregon, and I walked in there one day and introduced myself and said, I just want to get some experience, and I volunteered to work. And the GM said, yeah, we'll put you to work. And they had me kind of running stuff to the press box. It was before I knew anything about dealing with the media, but that was kind of an introduction. And after a couple of weeks, he called me into his office. He said, I see how you've been working and running around. We're going to start paying you, which was a nice surprise. But that was one season in baseball, and I realized I didn't want that many night games and road trips. And it's a different business to work in than football is, and but I enjoyed a season of doing minor league baseball very much.
So did you play both those sports growing up?
Yeah, football and baseball through high school, actually through junior college, and I walked on at Oregon. I can't say I ever played, but that was kind of the end of the dream.
And which one?
Yeah.
Which sport?
Both.
You walked on both sports at Oregon?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, like I said, I never played.
It doesn't matter. I stopped with you walked on at Oregon.
Thank you. Yeah, you can full stop there, right?
That's awesome. That's really cool. That's a cool thing to be able to do that. All right, so you end up in football. You now want to do something administratively.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get your master's, which, by the way, that's not super common, right? You don't need your master's, or do you, to get into this line of work?
Not really, although those programs, again, have become pretty common now. Okay. I know UCF has a program. There's a lot of schools. I think FSU does too. So there are a lot of schools that now offer sports management, sports administration, facility management degrees. So it's become much more competitive than when I started out. There wasn't a lot of competition because it was kind of a hidden secret, I guess. Yeah,
sports management's huge. Now everybody seems to have that under that umbrella. But you're right. I say this a lot, and this is more recent. If you were getting into the sports business, sports profession, major pro sports, you basically, I think, had three avenues. You could coach, you could kind of do what I do, in that sense, broadcasting-wise, or you could probably get into like the medicine part of it, right? Trainer, like those are probably common paths. I know there's other things like strength and conditioning, but that would go under coaching. Now it seems like the umbrella for that is so much bigger, from marketing to social media. Look how big a department like yours would be now.
That's right.
And also analytics.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a lot more layers to the sports landscape than when you first started.
No question. I mean, when I started in the NFL teams didn't even have a marketing department. The NFL basically sold out all their games. All the teams sold out all their tickets. So they didn't have to really market and try to sell. They just, send an invoice for a renewal, and people would send in their check. But that, I think the owners kind of woke up and realized there's revenue here that, we're not capturing, and we need to maybe market and get sponsorships. So that started to grow. But it's hard to imagine, there were no marketing departments, no, obviously, computer, IT, digital, social. It was pretty lean front offices at the time. So the options for starting out in a career were pretty limited. And honestly, I'd never really set out to be in PR or communications, but I kind of compare it to the corporate world. The entry level position is sales, because that's how you learn the business and learn the job. And in sports, or at least in the NFL, the entry was PR, communications. That's where you learn the business. So it was a good entry into the league.
What did you do in your intern year back, was that in the early 80s, right?
Yeah, well, I did actually 2 internships. My first was in the NFL office in New York, and that was in '83,
Okay.
'84, and then I spent a season interning with the Dolphins.
Okay. Oh, that was an internship. To the
'84
Dolphins.
season, yes, yeah.
Good season for
It was
my
a
Dan Marino Dolphins at the time.
great season, and Dan Marino and I are still both trying to get back to the Super Bowl. It never happened. And that time, as you know, people figured Marino's going to be back for a bunch of those,
Yeah.
and it never happened again. But that was a memorable first season and internship.
Yeah, that must have been I don't know what the NFL office was, different than the '84 internship with the Dolphins, right? I assume those were 2 different field
those
type
are
of things.
two separate internships, but it was the PR department at the league office as well.
Okay.
And that really opened the door for the internship with the Dolphins.
So then how did you go from the Dolphins there to the Steelers?
Yeah, there was the Steelers assistant PR director took a job in another sport, actually with Indy Racing League. And so their boss, their PR director, was looking to hire somebody. And I had met him. His name's Joe Gordon. I had met him that season twice, actually. The Steelers and Dolphins played twice, once in the regular season and then a playoff game. So I kind of knew Joe, and we have a mutual friend in the league office who was my boss, who called Joe when he heard that he had an opening, and he said, "You need to talk to Dan." And Joe called, and I went up and interviewed, and I didn't screw it up, and he hired me.
Yeah, and what an organization to work
Great
at,
organization, great organization, great family. The Rooneys are just, I can't think of a better family to work for in sports. They're amazing.
What did you learn? A decade with the
nine
Steelers.
years.
How
9
good
seasons.
was their PR department? And just the organization, as you said, the Rooneys in general.
Yeah.
The kind of the culture of Pittsburgh and
Yeah.
what they mean to that area and that city. Like how much did you just soak in that decade? Maybe sometimes without even knowing.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, and Pittsburgh it wasn't on my bucket list of places to live, but you go where the jobs are, and ended up being there for 9 years, and honestly never planned on leaving. I figured I would be a lifer because it was a good place to live. My wife and I met and got married and had kids there, and so I figured we were dug in. We had roots. So it was a great place. And again, the Rooney family was wonderful to work for. Now, I will say this, Tunch Ilkin, who's a former offensive lineman for the Steelers, who played when I was there, was a really good guy. He told some people that his career with the Steelers coincided with their demise because he came in after their 70s Super Bowl run, and then through the 80s, it weren't very good, had some lean years, and then they started getting good again in the 90s. And so you could describe my time there the same way. It coincided with their demise. We didn't have a lot of – I think we made the playoffs twice, maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
But the great thing that I appreciated is I was there for Chuck Knoll's last 7 seasons as the head coach.
Yeah.
And then Bill Cowher's first 2, but working with going back to Miami in my internship, Don Shula was the head coach. So I worked with a couple of Hall of Fame head coaches right at the beginning of my career, which is, that's how do you top that?
Unbelievable, really. I mean, do you have some? Do you tell a story about Shula or Knoll or Cowher at all that you can share? Of course.
Yeah. No.
What do you remember about those guys?
Well, Don Shula was very regimented, as most coaches are at that level, right? Yeah. And I remember it's like my first week during training camp, and he does a day after the preseason games media availability in the locker room, and there was like 2 chairs and 2 couches and a coffee table, and there was only about 6 or 7 media people that come in for that. And so I was setting up the locker room, and he comes walking in, and nobody told me, but I didn't set it up right. So he walks in, and the chair he sits in wasn't in the right place. And so he let me know it. So I got schooled on setting up I felt like the media guys could have helped me there. But I learned that really quickly, you do things the way he wants them done, and there's no problem. Yeah. And if you have a question, ask the question, but you don't assume anything. And then with Chuck Knoll, he was really a very, very smart man. He had a lot of hobbies outside of football. He grew rose bushes, and he got a pilot's license and flew. He had a boat. He had a life outside of football, honestly.
Yeah. Which is unusual.
Yes. And I remember we're in, I think it was Cleveland for a game. And in those days, it was a national game. I think it might have been a Monday night game, but the TV production crew wasn't at the same hotel we were, but they wanted to meet with Coach Knoll and me to talk. And they'd meet with the head coach. At that time, it was just the head coach and the PR person. Today, they talk with a whole bunch of players.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm driving. I got the rental car, and I'm driving with Chuck to the hotel, and we're just talking. It's like, it's my first season. I don't know him very well. He doesn't talk much. He can be very intimidating without trying. And I remember, I'm thinking, what can I talk about? The weather. I said something about the weather. Well, that was a mistake because he launched into heat inversions and all. Okay, he gave me a weather lesson that I wasn't looking for. But I learned that, if you're going to talk to him, you better know what you're talking about.
That's right. You got to bring something.
Right. Exactly.
That's good. In the early days of Bill Cowher, by the way, which turned into a very successful run for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And seemed like, I don't know if you knew all the rumors, but he bought a house in Jacksonville a million times over the years, too. It was always rumored that he would end up being a Jags coach.
Yeah, exactly. People try to connect the dots, right?
Absolutely. But Cowher, was he successful right away in those first couple of years?
The second season, we went to the playoffs.
Okay.
And went to Kansas City and lost in Kansas City. And it may have been Joe Montana's last season. Okay. He was with the Chiefs at the time.
All right.
So, it was, mixed, but they started to win then. Yeah.
All right. That's the background of Dan Edwards. And now we get to the point of him coming to Jacksonville. And that would set off a 30-plus year run. One of the original members of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we'll talk about how much that meant to him for a long time. That was a long run by a handful of folks in the organization. But how did you get to Jacksonville? You thought you were going to be a lifer with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a great organization, obviously an expansion team in the Jags.
Right.
Comes to light along with Carolina.
Yeah.
Did you seek this out, or did somebody come find you?
Good story. I remember it's like October, I think, and the owners are meeting to vote on expansion. They were going to assign or award 2 expansion teams. And as everyone in Jacksonville knows, they awarded Carolina a team, did not award a second team. There were 4 other cities in contention, and I think people just assumed that they were trying to wait for one to get their stuff together so they could, and most people thought that was St. Louis, that they were trying to help out, and St. Louis's ownership group never really came together. Wayne Weaver really made a push and made a good impression on the owners. So a month later, they award the team to Jacksonville. And I remember I'm walking into my office, and the TV's on ESPN at the time, and this announcement's just being made that NFL is awarding an expansion team to Jacksonville. And I looked at the TV, I go, wow, that's interesting. And that was my only thought. And then as I thought more about it, I thought, an expansion team would be quite an experience if I were able to do something like that, kind of a once in a career, because the NFL to that point only had most recent expansion was 1976 when the Buccaneers came in.
Yeah.
So this is almost 20 years later, and you're thinking this is like a once in a career this happens.
Yeah, that was good thinking.
So I was really intrigued by Charlotte. And at this time, I just mentioned, we were in Kansas City for a playoff game with the Steelers. And prior to the game, I'm in the officials' locker room. We have a pregame meeting with the officials and PR directors and kind of sync up watches and a lot of things. And Roger Goodell is in the room. And this was before he was the commissioner. He was the guy who was spearheading the expansion process. Yeah. And I knew Roger from my internship in the league office. He was there at the time in the PR department. And so we were friends. So before this meeting in the officials' locker room started, I grabbed him to the side. I said, hey, Roger, if you have a few minutes at halftime, I'd like to talk with you. He said, okay, yeah, no problem. So forgot about it, go on, start the game. First half ends, there's a tap on my shoulder, and Roger says, you wanted to talk? So we go out behind the hallway, behind the press box. And I said, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking to leave. I love the Steelers. I love Pittsburgh. But I'm really intrigued by expansion teams. And I said, I just wanted to put a bug in your ear. If Carolina is looking for a PR director, I would be interested in talking with them. And he looks, kind of steps back. He goes, Carolina. He goes, that's interesting because Jacksonville has been asking about you. I said, well, that's good too. So I think I eventually learned, like David Selden and Dan Connell, who were really running the front office of the Jaguars at the time, in each area where they had to fill a position, especially a department head, they were talking with people around the league, talking to people at the league office, other teams, to get their lists together of who should we talk to, who should we consider. And so I ended up on their list, and I remember the second day of the draft ended, and I had a flight that night to come to Jacksonville to interview, and it happened very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, no doubt once you got it, or were like, I don't know about, did you hesitate? Do you remember?
Once it was offered, there was no doubt. And,
Okay.
and fortunately, my wife, Tricia, was all fully supportive. But we moved here. In fact, she had never been here, never seen it. I had only been here for the interview. So it was a little bit sight unseen. We had 3 young kids at the time, so that's not an easy time to move either. But it was, as I said, it's a once-in-a-career opportunity. And once they made the offer, I knew that it was the right move. And not a lot. Some people thought it was crazy leaving the Steelers, the organization there. In fact, that season, 94 season, we were here. I call it our redshirt season. And the Steelers go to the Super Bowl that year, just after I left. Now, they lost to Dallas, but they were just starting to get really good, right? So some people are going, nice move. But it was the right move. It was the right time, and never looked back. I've never regretted it. It worked. Couldn't have worked out more beautifully.
Wow, what a start. The start is obviously well documented, so we don't have to live through it all. But from your vantage point, I mean, trailers to legitimately starting everything. I mean, what? Yeah. Give us a sense of what that was like.
It was, as David Selden used to say, we're starting with a blank sheet of paper. So, in my case, you got to build the PR department. Okay, you got to hire the staff. You got to create the policies and procedures and all of that stuff, because they didn't have anybody who knew how to do that. Yeah. So that's why I thought it was a great opportunity, because you don't get to start from scratch. And that was one of the great things. But I will say, and especially when the Steelers go to the Super Bowl that year, I'm thinking in coming down here, expansion teams historically were terrible. They just, the Bucs struggled for years, and I think even some of the other earlier ones really struggled. So I'm coming here thinking it's going to be 10 years before we sniff playoffs. Yeah. I better just get used to that. But the owners were very generous in awarding extra draft picks to the 2 expansion teams. So that accelerated the process a lot.
Yeah, they had learned from the Bucs.
Yeah, I think so. And they don't want to field a team that can't compete. So I think they were trying to help the new teams out, and some of the owners later said, yeah, we probably helped them too much. Yeah. But it was, again...
Thank goodness.
Yeah, right? But it was, and that's 94 season, I remember, of course, Tom Coughlin was here, I don't know, a month or 2 months before I was, I think. So he was kind of putting together a skeleton coaching staff and a scouting staff. And he wanted to spend that 94 season. Now, they were obviously going to be scouting college games for the draft for the next year.
Yeah.
For 95. And he wanted himself and a few of the other coaches and scouts to go to NFL games to scout players, because of free agency and the Plan B process for players and all that. So it was really a player acquisition season, or at least preparing for the player acquisition. So Tom came to me and said, "Can we do this?" So I, of course, knew all the PR directors. We're all. It's like a fraternity. We're all friends. We work with each other, help each other. So I would request game credentials for Tom to go and sit in the press box at a lot of these games around the league, so he could scout. And again, they were all very generous. Probably felt like they were too generous, but that was a big help. I think that scouting process was able to happen throughout 94 that really kind of set it up for the start of the 95. So 94, I was doing a lot of those things that aren't normal.
Do you know if that was Carolina did the same thing?
I think they did some of that, but I don't think they did it to the extent that we did. And the other thing is they had Bill Polian, they had Mike McCormick, they had people who had been in the NFL and around the NFL. Tom had been an assistant coach, but had never been an NFL head coach. So they had, I think, more familiarity with the league and the personnel and all that. So I don't think they did the same degree of advanced scouting that Tom and our staff did. But again, it was kind of it was new territory for everybody.
Yeah, everybody's learning. In your job, I mean, you're doing a lot of different things, but one of them is to be probably pretty close with the head coach, right? I mean,
absolutely.
That really never changed, I think, during your time as a director. So how was that relationship? What was that like the early days before it became kind of the trusting days? And then Tom knew he could lean on you, and you kind of figured out Tom. I mean, that must have been a heck of an acclimation period.
It was, but I was really, I think, set up well for success because of working with Don Shula and Chuck Knoll.
Okay.
And Tom knew that, and I think that was like, okay, this guy's been in the league for 9 years, with two guys who were going to the Hall of Fame, and so he kind of knows what it's supposed to look like. And again, this was Tom's first go-round as a head coach in the NFL. He had obviously been at college level, but so he, I think, leaned on me a little bit with some of the background and some of that, how other guys do it. But he also had his way of doing things, and I had to learn that, like everybody did. But you learn. It was like I said earlier with Don Shula. As long as you do it the way it's supposed to be done, you're good. No worries.
Yeah.
And Tom was the same way, and there was no ambiguity. No question the way things should be done. And again, if you do it that way, you don't have to worry.
Interesting perspective, at least I have, on your job and the way things have kind of morphed in a sense. At that time, you've got a new team in Jacksonville. You're obviously trying to market and promote in many things. You're the liaison between the media and the players and coaches and everybody else at that time. And the league is not as big as it eventually becomes. I think, it's big, as you mentioned. It's always been kind of big, but not like it is today.
Yes.
Right? So do you feel like where you started here in Jacksonville, the job changed a little bit over the 30 years because the liaison part kind of shifts to a maybe, hey, we don't need you guys as much as you think we do.
Yeah.
Not that you purposely say that, but that whole juxtaposition of the 30 years really probably changed, right?
Big change, dramatic change. As an example, with the Steelers, every road game, the Steelers put, I think there were 9 sports writers on the team charter.
Wow.
And these were all small towns around Pittsburgh. And they were little newspapers that didn't have the budget. They wouldn't be able to fly and cover road games. And again, Joe Gordon, my boss there, went to Dan Rooney and said, we got to get these guys on the plane. If we don't take them, they're not going to be there. And then our stories aren't in their papers.
Yeah.
And again, you're trying to appeal to that whole area around Pittsburgh and all those small towns. So to Joe's credit and Dan Rooney's credit, they agreed. So it was that where you had about 9 writers on the team plane, which today would not even be considered.
No.
But they were there to do their job. It was professional. It wasn't like, they owed the team good coverage, but the team wanted coverage. And that was one way to get it. To the point today, the media, as you said, sometimes there's a mentality that I see where the teams and leagues almost feel like they don't need the media. They have their own networks now.
Yeah.
They have their own websites now.
They can control a lot.
They have own reporters now. And so they are their own media outlet and spokesperson. So I don't, we never, while I was there, got to that point, but the media also changed in the fact that a lot of newspapers shut down, went out of business.
True.
And a lot of TV stations stopped traveling to road games.
Yeah.
And, I remember the days early on where you would have probably 8 or 10 national newspapers coming to a big game, or Washington Post and Dallas Morning News and Chicago Tribune, and a lot of these papers traveled their key NFL writers to cover the big games, and that stopped. They don't travel. Those guys don't travel anymore either. So it's changed a lot. The media went through a downsizing and budgets and all that, and teams started turning internally to their own, departments to I think fill the gap to the point that it is today. I think again, you got the media still covers. You still cover the team, but it's not like it was 28, 27, 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm, right? Because you're right. You mentioned it. I mean, the media business has shrunk.
Yes.
While the NFL balloon has just continues to grow in many respects. But press boxes are probably less populated.
No question.
Quite frankly.
Yeah. I used to be concerned because we had, and I remember this was one of the things I kind of enjoyed. We're up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin for our first training camp, and the stadium is under construction still. And, it wasn't done until they were still painting walls the night of the first preseason game, right? So it was close. But I had the blueprints for the press box, and I needed to lay out the entire press box, assign all the seats to all the media, and decide who should sit where, based on, their viewership or readership or circulation or whatever it might be. So I did that, laid it all out. But we had, at that time, I think it was 120 seats in the press box. Might have been more, which for an expansion team and brand new and all that, that was fine. We could fill it up. But as time went on, we weren't filling it up as much. And we also did some remodeling in the press box, so it shrunk, which was actually a good thing. We didn't need that big of a press box. So it got to the point where, I don't want to have a bunch of empty seats up here because, the boss is going to walk through and say, there's a lot of empty seats. You guys don't need all this space. Let's make it a suite or whatever. And I didn't want to lose that. So there were a lot of media and a lot of fringe media and a lot of website people that wanted to be credentialed. And early on, I was resistant to that, but I realized some of these might be okay to give them a chance, give them a try. There were some school newspapers, college newspapers.
Yeah.
And I would always want to credential them to give them a chance. And also to fill some seats. And also to get stories in the JU paper and the UNF and wherever. So it was trying to fill some seats and again, kind of help make sure that we've got a level of coverage that we want and make sure nobody comes in and says we don't need that press box anymore.
Favorite game? Is it?
Wow.
Is it the one that so many refer to?
At Denver?
Yeah.
Playoff? Yeah, it probably has to be.
Okay.
Because it's not just the game itself, which was, it was on the heels of an upset win in Buffalo the week before, and then the upset win by the same score in Denver, and then flying home and flying over the stadium and all the that's very memorable. Absolutely.
So you know a lot of things. You and Skip Richardson probably could write a book together. That would be really good. Skip will never tell. That's maybe the beauty of them. They got the right guy in that spot.
Yeah, right.
But when you're coming back from Denver, do you get word too that everybody's at the stadium? Do you help facilitate that? Did you know something was up there? Yeah,
we did. We got, and I'm not sure, it may have been Jeff Cannon who was operations at the stadium at the time for us. Somebody with SMG, I can't remember who, but somebody got in touch with the plane, with the pilot, to let him know, there's all these people at the airport, and just let the team know. And that, I think, sparked his thought to let's do a flyover over the stadium. And going over the stadium, he kind of dipped a wing, and he looked down, and half the stadium was full of people. It was, and this is I think it's 1 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, late.
Which was amazing. So we land where we always land, and the charters always take off and land from a separate pad, off the runways. We don't go through the terminal. Buses would come out on the tarmac. We'd get off the plane and get on the buses, and then they would bus us to the stadium. And pulling out of off the tarmac onto the road, there were just cars lined up everywhere on both sides of the road, and people standing out waving. It was, I mean, this is even before you get to the main road going out of the airport, and it was unbelievable to see. And these people, you know, in their minds, they're showing up there to greet the team when they're coming back. Well, they couldn't get close to the team because of security and you know, the airfield. But we were trying to get the word back to people to just go to the stadium. So that was, you know, we did the kind of impromptu welcome back in the stadium on the field, and Tom spoke, and Dave Weidel and several players. But that wasn't planned. That wasn't something we were going to do until we heard and saw the turnout and what, you know, how many people were there. We couldn't just get in the cars and go home.
I think people missed that part. Everybody's heard about the stadium part, but there were still a lot of people lined up at the airport too.
It was amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool. What do you, I'm sure we could do an hour and a half, 2 hours on this alone, but can you give us a Cliff's Notes version of what you did on like a game day? Like what your job was? So people understand it. Obviously, I know it. I've saw it.
Yeah.
But what do you do from start to finish?
Yeah, for the most part, and you spend the whole week preparing for game day. And in fact, my mom used to say, it seems like an awful lot of work for a football game. But you start, and my day for a 1 o'clock kick would start at 8 o'clock in the office, and you've got a lot of details you need to check on and verify. You know, I'd walk the press box, make sure it's set up, make sure it's clean, make sure if it had rained overnight that we don't have ceiling tiles falling, and just make sure it's ready. And you know, you have flip cards and all kinds of things for the media that need to be ready to go out. So a lot of it pregame is just kind of making sure all the stuff we've done during the week that it's ready to go and we're good. And if something comes up, you know, that we have to deal with, let's do it. And then you have, I mentioned the officials meeting is 90 minutes before kickoff, and go to that and get the inactives and come to back, you know, bring to the officials to the head coach, and they exchange information, and from there, you know, get that information to the press box. So a lot of that is kind of preparing for kickoff. And then once kickoff happens, it's really, you're kind of watching the game, but also I had a lot of notes, records or milestones or things to watch for, streaks, that when something comes up, and today it's very different. I'll get back to that. But when something came up, I wanted to be able to, A, announce it in the press box, and B, call the TV truck and say, you know, that was a team record or whatever.
Yeah, you had a line to the TV truck for that.
Yes, yeah, always. So, and I would listen to the broadcast. They would put a sound loop at my seat, at all the PR director seats, so I could listen to the broadcast, and among other things, just to make sure, like if they were mispronouncing somebody's name, I'll pick up the phone and call and tell them and get it right. Or if there's something that, you know, that they're missing or that I can add to their broadcast, I'll call the producer. But today, everything is stat pass, and I don't even want ESPN. The stats industry is mushroomed, and a lot of that now, I think, part of the offshoot of that is the gambling and the prop bets and everything else, which wasn't really a thing when I was in the league. But so anyway, during the game, a lot of that, watching what's going on. I would keep an eye on the sideline because I loved finding people who didn't belong and getting them out. And that was like a challenge. Like people used to joke they'd wait, Dan's going to get somebody. Somebody's getting run.
Game.
Somebody's getting run today. And then, you know, you get to the end of the game and locker room, you know, I'd always have some notes and stats for the head coach and say, you know, here's a few highlights, here's a few things you might want to touch on. And then we'd go to the press conference and we'd open the locker room for the media. So, you know, and then once all that is done, that's about an hour post game, and then it's to the office and going through stats and records and notes and kind of putting notes together for the press release for the next day. So it's kind of an all day, prepare for the game, go through the game, summarize the game, and so, you know, it's a long day.
Yeah.
But that's the joy. Game day was really the fun part, the fun day.
Yeah, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you have to get there when the coach is there?
Yeah,
normally, or is that how you did it?
And that's a challenge with Tom Coughlin. Because he'd get there early. In fact, I'll tell you, here's a little funny story. Pat Hanlon was my counterpart with the Giants. Still there. Pat's still
He's
the
great.
Giants.
One of the best.
He is one of my best friends. He was my assistant in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
He was with me with the Steelers for 2 years. And when the Giants hired Tom, this was, of course, he spent that season, the 2002, I think, in Jacksonville and not coaching. And I would get stats. He wanted to keep all the stats from the whole season, so I'd get stats to him. But when the Giants hired him, they did their announcement and the press conference and all that. So I called Pat and I said, "Let me give you the book on Tom Coughlin." A lot of people don't know the origin of that term, that phrase, the book. But anyway, he said, "All right, hit me." I said, 6 a.m. in the office is a really good time of day because Tom is there. He's had his workout. He's had his breakfast. He's in his office. There's nobody around. It's quiet. He's relaxed. I said, it's a perfect time. Anytime I have things I need to run by him, I need to get questions answered or, give him a heads up on something. I said, 6 a.m. is the best time with Tom. And Pat says, if I'm talking to Tom Coughlin at 6 a.m., it'll be by phone. I said, okay, you do it your way. But so it's not like that was every day.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's you want to be in there. It's like when you're not there, something happens.
It seems like it, right?
Right. So you have to be there, and that's the job. And it's 7 days a week through the season, and either you like that and can deal with it, or you can't, and you find a better job.
Speaking of something happens, something does happen. I mean, it's the NFL. It's a big, big thing. I know when I first got to town in 2008, it felt like we had a player in the news like every week. And that really died down, by the way. But in 2008 and 2009, like there was stuff going on like seemingly all the time with a Jags player. How difficult are those situations from a PR standpoint? To kind of police, there's a lot of people talking about which way we should handle it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was that part of your job to kind of help advise in a spot like that?
Yes. Yeah. And, sometimes your coach or your GM or your owner or whoever has their own idea of what they want to say or the way they want to handle it. And a person in my role, your job is to, have the information, tell them what's going on and, have a recommendation or a suggestion. And if they go with it, great. If they want to do it their way, go with it. I mean, that's, they're the bosses. So you have to be flexible, but you also want to be prepared and want to prepare them. I never wanted to ever have the coach or the owner or whoever it was, I didn't want to put them in front of the media unprepared for whatever they're going to be talking about. So you want to make sure people are in the loop. And that's for the communications department. That's the job. It's in the title. Yeah. So, those things come up. Players would get arrested, and it would seem like it would happen at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And, I get that call at home from a writer, and, and then I got to call the coach or the GM. And so I don't miss that. I don't miss those calls at all. Yeah. In fact, it's funny. My son Christian, as you know, works for the Colts in their communications department. I remember it was a Friday night at home, and he had wanted to, and even in high school, he knew that this was what he wanted to do. And I had one of those calls about a player getting arrested, and I had to call, I think it was Tom at the time, was still a coach, and deal with it and call back and get a statement out. And I finally get off the phone, and I look at Christian. He's kind of watching, taking all this in. I said, that's why you don't want to work in PR. Exactly. I said those moments are the ones you don't want, but that's part of it.
Part of the territory. Well, speaking, that'll be a good little transition here, so I don't forget. It is pretty cool, right? You've got your boys are in it, and your daughter is now in the Jags organization. At least at the time we do this. You must have been doing something right. They must have been watching Dad. I mean, one son's in the PGA Tour now, but he was with the NFL, and Christian's up there with Indianapolis and has been in the league a bit now. So. Is it interesting to you that they wanted to do that after watching you do it for so long, the hours and sometimes those kind of phone calls?
It's bad parenting. I couldn't talk them out of it. But no, they grew up in this business. I mean, from when they were babies, when, I was in the league before I was married, before Trish and I had kids. And so they grew up. This was Dad's work. And it's interesting because, as an example, Thanksgiving was always a work day. Whether you were playing a game or not, you had practice. Yeah. And, so what was normal in my family is Dad goes to work. And when the kids got a little bit old enough, maybe 7 years old, 8 years old, I would take them with me to the stadium, and they'd have a ball, give them a football, and they'd have a blast. And then, that would get them out of the house and out of the kitchen. But I wanted to bring them around my job as much as I could, because the job takes you away from family a lot. So it was important to try to ingratiate them into this business and this job, and what his dad gone all the time doing. So, but they. Yeah, I couldn't talk them out of it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That you must have done a good job in that sense. Must have enjoyed it enough. You must still come home with a smile on your face when they saw you, at least, to want to get into it the way they're into it. How important is it to you, or how much do you value being one of the original Jags employees? And for the longest time, and I forget the end of the run, but until you retired, there were only like 4 or 5 of you, I think.
Exactly. That's a badge of honor. It really is. I think. Coming here in actually right this time in 1994, this time of year, and when I retired in January of 2022, there were 4 remaining. I was one of 5 remaining original employees, and then I retired to make it 4. And those 4 are still there.
Yeah, Sexton, Skip.
Yeah, Brian. Skip actually came the second year, but Mike Perkins, Elisa Abbott. And who else? Brian Sexton and Tim Bishko in the ticket office. Okay. So those, they're still
there.
They're still there. They're probably heading for 30 years.
There you go. That's cool. That is a pretty neat thing. All right, where did this whole back of the bus thing come from? So just a little background here. The only thing I know about it, I came in 2008. So I think we're the official station of the Jags. I don't really know when I started traveling, but the one thing is when you get that bus, it's a staff bus. You don't get on with the players. In the back used to always be Dan Edwards, Mike Perkins, Tony Baselli, Jeff Lageman.
Equipment guys.
Some equipment guys as well. And so that changed over the years, but you always found in the back of the bus. Was there a reason behind it? What's the story behind it?
I think we were there were a handful of people that traveled all the road games, and then there were some staff that traveled to some games and not all of them. And we didn't want to be sitting in different seats, every bus trip and all that, and we wanted to sit together. So I think we just ended up in the very back of the staff bus at some point in that first season, and it kind of became our little club. And we would talk about the game, and it was cutting up, and these guys are hilarious, and we could just talk honestly about what happened, and it's us. It's like, this is our group. So it was fun. It was something that I think we had a lot of lean years, as you know, a lot of losing. So it was kind of, we had to find a way to, I think, handle the losing and have a little humor and bust on each other and kind of get through that. But it was a lot of fun. They were great friends to this day.
That became a little bit like your locker room in a sense, right? Kind of like what happens on the back of the bus stays in the back of the bus.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Some shenanigans.
And I will say, I think as time went by, some people were very intimidated about going anywhere near the back of the bus.
I can tell you I was. I mean, I think I got shut out from like row 4 or something. At one time, I was like, all right, I'll never do that again.
Stop right there.
I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't by Dan. It was probably by like Perkins.
Probably
or something.
Perk, yeah. Probably right.
Okay, so where did Danny Ray come from then? Again, I catch on to some of this
stuff. You do,
yeah.
You got a lot of intel here.
But where did that come from?
That's my legal name, Danny Ray Edwards. That is the name my parents gave me. It was not Daniel. It's Danny Ray. And a lot of people knew that, and they just started calling me Danny Ray. And there's some people that I think they think it's just a nickname, but it's my legal name.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But somebody found that out.
Yeah, a bunch of people did.
Well, especially if you're early on, that paperwork probably got around.
Yeah, exactly. But it was.
So is it normal spelling?
Yeah.
R-A-Y?
Yeah.
Right.
Danny Ray, yeah. And it was funny because the equipment guys especially would always call me that. And so their interns would always refer to me as Danny Ray. I don't think they knew my name. That's what they call him. But yeah, that's the real name.
The in the weeds part of an organization, you just mentioned like the equipment guys.
Yeah.
Right? And
good people.
your line of work, or the video guys like Mike Perkins' line of work. I mean, there's so much. I don't think people on the outside can get a great feel. I think we all probably have this in our different industries and worlds, right? Where it's just kind of like, Yeah, this is it. It's a different group, or it's a special group, or it's a unique group. Or there are definitely those pockets in an organization.
No question. There are a lot of kind of behind the scenes people and faces that the fan wouldn't know about, wouldn't hear about, wouldn't even realize, that there's 8 or 10 people videotaping every game and dubbing the tapes. And now that system's changed too. But
a little easier now.
But there are a lot of jobs behind the scenes that most people would not even realize exist. But they're all jobs that go into doing, everything that the team needs to do, but whether it's putting on games or travel or everything, it's, a lot of kind of faceless, nameless people who do their jobs, and a lot of people enjoy that anonymity. That's okay.
That's true too. Yeah, we'll keep it that way. But there's a lot of pride in that. Speaking of a lot of pride, a couple years ago now, you're named in Canton, Ohio, in the Hall of Fame and the Award of Excellence, a special kind of group of people that have contributed so much to the NFL. What does that mean to you? And did you know that was coming? Did you?
Yeah.
Can you let us know when you heard about it?
That I will say first. That's the greatest honor of my career, the crowning achievement, and to say that
well earned.
Well, thank you. But to say that I aspired to that, nobody did, because this only began 3 years ago. A group went to the Hall of Fame and said, we need to recognize, there's five groups now. We need to recognize some of these nameless, faceless peoples that I just mentioned that are career lifers in the NFL.
Yeah.
Assistant coaches, trainers, equipment guys, video guys, PR people. That we need to recognize something. So they created this Awards of Excellence, and each year now, they have a committee for each of those fields and disciplines, and their committee selects up to three nominees each year now. So this coming up in June is the 4th year of the awards. I was there last year, and it's a wonderful honor, and to go in with some of your good friends. I plan on going back every year because there will be more of our peers that go in, and it's a good time to kind of have a reunion with some of those people. And also it's interesting because I know some of the people in the other areas. Last year in our class, I knew 2 of the 3 video directors.
Oh, yeah.
Who were there. This year, Dick Hoke is the longtime Steelers running backs coach. And their longtime trainer are both being honored, and I know them. So it's fun to see people even from other teams from around the league that you've known a long time.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And does that mean at the end of the day you think you're a pretty good PR guy?
I apparently didn't screw it up too bad, so yeah, I guess.
That's part of the gig in a way, right?
Yeah.
Don't screw it up.
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, there's a sense of that. They got enough. There's enough issues and other things. You help clean it up, but also don't get in the way.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you've got to know kind of where the landmines are and the things to watch out for, and be aware. And as I was talking earlier, prepare people for being asked about or dealing with those things.
Yeah.
You've got to be aware. You cannot kind of be spend your time in your office and be oblivious to what's going on or what's coming down the road, and so that's an important part of the job. Yeah.
All right, Tony Boselli into the Hall of Fame. How big of a moment was that for you?
Huge. That was, as I said earlier, I spent 5 years campaigning for Tony, and it had to happen. And as we all know, it would have happened earlier had he not been injured and had such a short career. It would have been, as I told some of and I really campaigned with a lot of the voters, the Hall of Fame voters. It's a group of, now it's like 48. At one time it was about 36, like one from each NFL city. And I knew most of those. They were mostly sports writers, and I would talk with a lot of them. And I would say, here, consider this. I said, if Tony would have been in 10 years ago, if his career was 10 years long, he had really 7 seasons.
Yeah.
And that was a hurdle a lot of the voters couldn't get over. It was so short. I remember talking to Dan Deerdorf. He said, "Yeah, the career's too short. I can't vote for a guy who played 7 seasons." So I understood it. That was why it took so long. But what a great achievement for Tony. So great to see for Tony and Angie and the family and Jacksonville, the fans. Yeah.
How will he do in this role, do you think?
I think he'll do great. I think he's the perfect person for it. I told him that. I wish he had been in this role about 3 years ago. But I think he has the right combination of temperament and mentality and experience and knowledge and enough ego to be really good at what he does, but enough that he knows to dial it back on the ego. So I think he's perfect. I think he'll do a great job, and I look forward to seeing what these guys do. It's all new. I mean, there's so many new people there now. If I walked in, I probably wouldn't know very many, but Tony, I'm really happy for him. I loved that Shad hired him for that role. I think he's the perfect person for it. And I know no one who has a bigger heart for the Jaguars than Tony Baselli.
This might not make the cut as we wrap up and probably go over, but I've got to ask you how you fixed the uniform situation from 2000 and whatever. So the backstory here is I got to give this. As we go out to the new uniforms in Oregon at the Nike facility, and we're out there well in advance. It must have been months
in the
advance,
spring, yeah.
Right? And the Jags were waiting until, I think, July, right before camp, to unleash new uniforms. So they show the whole thing. Justin Blackman, by the way, was modeling the uniform, so that will tell you how long ago it was. And really cool. Like, that was a fun time. Went just for like
absolutely.
36 hours. A great trip.
Being on the Nike campus. What a great place.
It was awesome. And so they do a whole presentation in there. And long story short is we end up leaving like a tripod or a battery in that room after we had moved. And so you could take pictures and everything else, or later down the road when this thing was embargoed to be released. So I went back in, got the tripod, everything else, and I see all like these mannequins lined up in the Jags uniform, and I just like snap another picture or two. And so we have this launch in July, and we're live in the parking lot in Lot J, and we had already planned to put all this on the website, which we did, all the picture gallery. We waited. We followed the rules, everything else. Well, all of a sudden, I'm literally like going on at 5 o'clock, and it's like 4:58, and Dan calls me, and he said, "Did you put a picture up there that you shouldn't have put up?" And I'm like, "I don't think so. I think we just put the pictures up." Well, it turns out the Miami Dolphins, I didn't even realize this. The Vikings and I think the Dolphins were also doing uniform unveils.
That's right.
And we had put all the pictures into this, what do you call it, slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dolphins weren't unveiling theirs until like 2 days later, I think it was. Right. Well, in that last photo or whatever I took of the mannequins, the Dolphins photo
in the background,
was in there.
Yeah.
Had no idea. So obviously you had got a phone call, and I'm probably barred from Nike forever. How did you fix that, Dan Edwards? You had some crazy pull in the NFL.
It's relationships are really important in this business, and you get some of those phone calls, and you've got to be able to diffuse it a little bit. You scooped the Dolphins on their uniform reveal, so congratulations on that. But there's things like that come up that you can't control, but it happens, and you have to deal with it, and you try to fix it as well as you can, and get people to move on somehow.
Crazy. I think even 10 years later, it would have been even worse.
No question.
Because they were just at least having to search a website, not social media or whatever else that had gone crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's part of your job, right? You kind of have to deal with stuff that really you didn't make a mess out of.
It was some people describe the job as the guy at the circus who walks behind the elephant scooping up the poop. Sometimes that's the job.
That's I guess I was the elephant. Very good. All right, we close with this. We've been asking folks this question: when will the Jaguars win a Super Bowl? If you had to guess.
Boy, and maybe I'm being optimistic. I think 5 years. I think, again, it's a total reset this year, and it's total really from the top down with Tony and with the coach and the GM, and I think it's really good. It's a total restart, but it takes a little time. It doesn't happen overnight. But maybe I'm a little optimistic, but I'd say 5 years. I'd love to see it.
Oh, I think everybody would love to see that. That'd be a nice timeline right around the opening of the new stadium by the end of the decade as well. One of the greats in the business of all time, Dan Edwards, a longtime Jaguar Hall of Famer. Thanks for joining us on Storytellers of the 904.
Thank you, Brent. I enjoyed this.